Exorcism is the religious practice of expelling demons or devils believed to be present in humans, animals, places, or objects. When humans or animals are believed to be affected, this is referred to as possession. The interpretation of this condition depends on the culture in question. Many of you know or have heard of the film The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Today's case is based on the true story that inspired the film, except that the girl's real name was Anneliese Michel. It is one of the only cases of exorcism that has left the walls of the Catholic Church and had to stand up in court. Anneliese Michel was born on September 21, 1952, in Leibelfingen to a strictly Catholic family. Leibelfingen is located in the Bavarian Franconian Lower Main region in a wine-growing village called Klingenberg. She was described by her family and friends as friendly and sociable, but also serious and introverted. Catholicism was an integral part of her life, as her family was devoutly religious and her 3 great-aunts were nuns. She herself went to Mass several times a week, often prayed with rosaries, and sometimes punished herself by sleeping on the floor as penance. She and her friend Marie-Louise Burdich were sitting together on the train when Anneliese was suddenly overcome by a kind of faintness. Later, she described it as feeling as if her thoughts had escaped her and her brain had shut down. Marie noticed that something was wrong with her friend. She became nervous but didn't know what to do, as her legs were stuck to the floor of the train and she couldn't move. She wanted to call the train staff, but the words stuck in her throat. A railroad tie caused turbulence in the car, and as if the earth had loosened, Marie was able to move again and knew she could speak. But she paused, because her friend's eyes cleared again, and suddenly Anneliese began to laugh about what had just happened. At first uncertainly, then loudly, Marie joined in. The following night, Anneliese Michel felt something pressing down on her chest, pinning her to her bed. Her sister, who slept in the same room, was so close and yet so far away. She tried to call out to her, but couldn't, as if something was choking her. The next morning, she told her mother about her nighttime experiences, who was understandably concerned. But because nothing similar happened the next night or the nights after that, they let the matter rest. Until Anneliese suffered another seizure 11 months later, in August 1969. This prompted her mother to make an appointment with their family doctor, Dr. Vogt, who referred her to neurologist Dr. Luthi in Aschaffenburg. Luthi performed an EEG, but the neurological examination was negative, so everything was fine. Nevertheless, Luthi suspected and diagnosed a cerebral seizure disorder, now known as epilepsy. Shortly thereafter, she contracted pneumonia and tuberculosis, whereupon she was sent to a sanatorium in the Allgäu region. There she suffered further seizures, during which, according to one author, she perceived devilish grimaces and faces for the first time. Due to her bedridden state and isolation caused by her illness, as well as her resulting absences from school, she fell into depression and turned increasingly to God. The strict upbringing of her mother, who told her that she was not allowed to have relationships with men, go to dances, or visit female friends, isolated the already lonely Anneliese even more. That was in 1970, the same year that another brain examination was carried out, which again proved negative. Nevertheless, she was prescribed an anticonvulsant medication. Over the next few years, she continued to suffer from these seizures. In 1972, another brain scan was scheduled, which this time showed minor abnormalities. But in Luthi's opinion, these did not explain the symptoms she described. He nevertheless prescribed Zentropil, a drug that controls epilepsy. But in 1973, her symptoms reached a new peak when she began to hear a constant knocking in the closet, under the floor, and above the ceiling even when she was not having seizures. Her sisters also heard these noises. She also claimed to hear voices from hell. According to her mother, Marie stood in the living room one day in front of a statue of the Virgin Mary, stiff with a hateful look on her face, her features contorted and her eyes completely black. She also told Dr. Luthi for the first time that she saw demon faces and that, quote, "the devil is inside her." Despite her delusions and seizures, Anneliese graduated from high school in 1973 and began studying at the University of Education in Würzburg, moving into a Catholic student residence. She was admitted to the University Neurological and Polyclinic Hospital for treatment. There she was diagnosed with neurotic depression with developmental characteristics and epilepsy. The latter diagnosis was supported by another EEG. She was prescribed Tegretol, a much stronger medication. 2 years later, in 1975, her condition worsened again. She stayed up all night, prayed constantly, and began eating spiders and flies. According to her family, she even licked her own urine off the floor. She destroyed all kinds of religious statues and crucifixes. She also developed powers that were described as superhuman. For example, she could crush an apple with one hand without much effort. Anneliese's mother said that Dr. Luthi instructed her to seek out a priest from the Society of Jesus, a Catholic religious order. In retrospect, Luthi claimed that he never gave this advice. Either way, they sought religious help from Ernst Alt, a clergyman who was a pastor in a small village. Although he initially referred them to medical help, he nevertheless performed a so-called minor exorcism on Anneliese Michel on July 1, 1975. He then said that Anneliese was possessed but not yet completely taken over by a demon, which is why he sought the advice of a bishop and asked him to perform further exorcisms. This bishop approved, but Father Renz was commissioned to do so, a priest who had gained a certain reputation in church circles. This was because he was campaigning for the beatification of a well-known clairvoyant. From the second session of the major exorcism onwards, Lenz recorded the proceedings on tape. I will now play a few original recordings to give you some impression of Anneliese Michel. But be warned, these recordings are probably the most disturbing I have ever heard.
Sage die volle Wahrheit.
Verdammt, die wahre Lehre glaubt an ihn noch. Wie eine Uhr. So, im Auftrag von der. Jetzt reicht! Ich sag nichts mehr. Nein! Und der soll das immer vorne. Und die Scheiße ist noch. Zieh's Babbel weg. Oh, da wird mehr gebabbelt als...
Des Heiligen Geistes.
During the exorcisms, Anneliese mentioned well-known figures such as Hitler, Nero, and Lucifer. But the mention of the name Valentin Fleischmann confirmed Renz's belief that Anneliese was possessed by a demon. Fleischmann was a priest from the 15th century who was excommunicated from the church for being a murderer. Renz was firmly convinced that Anneliese could never have known about Fleischmann, and she described his appearance in great detail. When her mother checked on her the next morning, she found her dead in her bed. She died of malnutrition, and because the entire family placed their hope in the exorcisms and did not seek medical assistance, her life ended at the age of only 23. After 67 exorcisms and weighing only 31 kilograms, the investigation into the Anneliese Michels case was opened on the day she died. The Michel family, Father Alt, and Renz sat in the dock. First, the defense presented its case. In their opinion, their witness statements and the recordings of the exorcisms were sufficient proof that Anneliese was possessed and did not suffer from mental health issues. Furthermore, it was noted that Anneliese had the right to refuse medical treatment and did so. According to testimony from Thea Hein, a friend of the family, she was present when Anneliese begged on her knees not to have to see a doctor. Nevertheless, during the events, Ernst Alt sought Anneliese's advice from a doctor friend named Richard Roth. He testified in court that he did not notice any external injuries when he visited Anneliese. On the other hand, her father Renz said that she had several bruises, swollen cheeks, and black eyes. This is an interesting contradiction in the two testimonies. But let's move on to the facts. The doctor also denied having said, quote, "There are no injections against the devil." Furthermore, they presented the autopsy report, in which Anneliese's brain was examined again, and once again, no abnormalities were found that could indicate that she suffered from epilepsy. In addition, people who die from malnutrition or have lived with it usually have ulcers in their mouths and under their skin. However, Anneliese Michel's body showed no such ulcers. Let us now turn to the position of the public prosecutor's office. The public prosecutor's office said that Anneliese suffered from epilepsy and paranoid psychosis, and that the family, Rens and Alt, were responsible for her death because they did not take the necessary steps to save her life. They did not address the recordings or the theory that Anneliese was possessed. Furthermore, they questioned Ernst Alt's credibility and concluded that he himself suffered from a mental disorder. They further argued that the medication Anneliese was prescribed suppressed her epileptic seizures, and that this suppression resulted in a delusional psychosis, and that the exorcisms only fueled the delusions and fit into her own world. With this statement, they pointed out that Anneliese behaved normally between exorcisms. It is unclear whether the medication suppressed the seizures. What is clear, however, is that Anneliese Michel's delusions were present before she was treated with medication. Ultimately, the public prosecutor's office stated that the delusional psychosis was caused by the suppression of the seizures through medication, but that the delusional psychosis was already present before treatment. The defendants Rens, Alt, and Anneliese Michel's parents were sentenced to 6 months in prison with 3 years probation. The court accused the defendants of failing to seek medical help and convicted them of failure to render assistance. There are really only 2 interpretations of what happened. Let's start with the one I consider most likely, although some facts speak against it or are at least questionable. The official diagnosis is paranoid hallucinatory psychosis and epilepsy against a background of special psychosocial factors, with a psychogenic identification of a pathological nature with the role of a possessed person. Anneliese suffered from a delusional psychosis in which she assumed the role of someone possessed by the devil. The devil, because her entire environment was strictly Catholic. This means that if she had been raised Buddhist, for example, she would have identified with the role of Mara, who is the Buddhist counterpart to the devil in Buddhism. Furthermore, mental illness is often associated with possession in Catholicism. And during the exorcisms, Rens not only suggested personalities such as Fleischmann to Anneliese, but also confirmed her delusion that she was possessed by the devil, or, in her words, that the devil was inside her. If one wants to go even deeper, one could also see the possession as a cry for help, because in her situation, the only way out of the constraints of strict Catholicism was to take on the role of the devil. She was able to express the criticism she had always wanted to express without being directly punished by her family. In addition, it is not known for certain whether she took her medication regularly, because, as already mentioned, there were also phases in which she was free of seizures. The second explanation would be that she was really possessed by the devil or something else. The fact that all medical findings, regardless of which source you believe, say that there were no signs of epilepsy, at least from a neurological point of view, and that she knew a priest from the 15th century, one of whom was certain that she could not have known him, speaks in favor of this. Furthermore, the fact that Anneliese saw demonic faces and grimaces even before she was treated with medication, which the public prosecutor's office used to argue that she was mentally ill, can also be interpreted differently, which also becomes an argument for possession. In conclusion, I would say that the facts of the case do not allow us to rule out either possibility, although I find the scientific theory more plausible. But regardless of whether she was possessed or not, she should have been given medical treatment. Her death could definitely have been prevented. I hope I was able to give you an overview of the chronology of events surrounding Anneliese Michel. As always, I have linked my sources in the description if you would like to explore the topic in more detail. If you have your own theories or if I have forgotten anything, please let me know in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I would be delighted if you did so now. Of course, only if you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, good night, and see you soon. Ciao, everyone.